Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening the books on a finding that is, well, it's pretty startling. It's a fundamental reversal in one of the planet's most critical balancing acts.
That's right. We're talking about Africa's huge forests and its woody savannas.
Exactly. Ecosystems that have, historically provided this absolutely essential service for global climate stability.
Indeed, these areas have always been seen as a major carbon sink. To put that into perspective for you, Africa's land-based production, it it historically removes something like 20% of global carbon,
20%, that's an enormous planetary lung.
a crucial natural buffer against human emissions, yes.
But the data we've been looking at, and this is drawn from a new generation of high-res satellite analysis, it tells a stunningly different story.
It does.
Sometime during the last decade, that huge carbon sink, it flipped. Africa is now, for the first time we can accurately measure, a net carbon source.
It's sort of the ultimate bad news, good news situation. The bad news is, of course, the flip. The good news is that we finally have this granular, precise data that confirms it.
It pinpoints the timeline.
And most importantly, it identifies the exact drivers behind it, the why.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to be dissecting the findings from advanced spaceborne LIDAR and radar and really measuring the changes in the amount of wood out there over the decade between 2007 and 2017.
Yeah.
We need to know, when did this flip happen and what on earth does this mean for something like the Paris Agreement?
It's so crucial to set the stage here because this study really resolves a long scientific argument. For years, estimates of Africa's carbon balance were wildly controversial.
All over the map.
Completely. Some earlier models suggested it was a large, healthy sink, maybe removing up to 1 petagram of carbon a year.
Now, a petagram is 1 billion metric tons. That's a staggering amount.
It is. But then other research would come out and argue the sink was much smaller, maybe even close to zero, or already tipping towards being a source.
And that ambiguity must have been paralyzing for policymakers.
Absolutely. The problem was always the data. It was either too sparse in the field or the view from space was it was too coarse, too blurry.
So this new analysis, it steps into that debate, not with another model, but with a new level of actual empirical certainty. It's redefining what we thought we knew.
Fundamentally, yes.
Okay, so let's get into how this research cut through decades of, all that ambiguity. You mentioned the challenges, sparse field data, satellite maps that just didn't have the resolution. How did they actually get past that?
Well, think of it like trying to solve a crime with really blurry security camera footage from a block away. That's what we had before.
Okay.
Previous studies used these coarse spatial resolutions, maybe a kilometer for every pixel. That made it almost impossible to link carbon loss to, say, human activity.
Because things like deforestation for a small farm, that happens on a much smaller scale.
Exactly. Sometimes as tiny as 1 hectare. If your data resolution is too coarse, all those small repeated losses are they're invisible. You can't see them.
So you couldn't tell if the loss was from climate stress or a farmer clearing a field?
Precisely. So the methodological breakthrough was combining these advanced satellite systems. They use spaceborne LIDAR.
Right, that's the light detection and ranging.
Yes, from missions like GD and ISAT. And LIDAR sends down these beams that give you incredibly precise vertical profiles of the forest, basically mapping its height and structure.
So it's giving you that third dimension, the vertical measure.
It is, but LIDAR has a weakness. It struggles with cloud cover, which you get a lot of over rainforests. So they paired that with ALOS pulsar radar system.
Oh, and radar can see through the clouds?
It cuts right through them.
Mm.
And it's excellent at mapping the woody structure, the density that's under the canopy.
So you get this perfect synergy. Height from one, density from the other, and you can do it no matter the weather.
And that's only half the story. They took all this amazing input years of height and density data and then ran it all through these powerful machine learning algorithms.
Trained against observations from the ground, right?
Right. Trained against thousands of actual ground observations. And this whole process let them generate these annual Africa-wide maps, above ground woody biomass density, or AGBD.
AGBD. Let's make sure we translate that. When you say AGBD, we're basically just talking about the sheer weight of all the wood standing above the ground.
Essentially, yes, it's the metric that tells you about carbon storage. But the key takeaway is the resolution. They produced these maps in an unprecedented 100-meter pixel spacing.
Wow, okay.
That's fine enough to see disturbances as small as 1 hectare. So suddenly that crime becomes visible. You can track who did it and when.
And that ability to zoom right in is what moves us from just, having a hypothesis to having hard facts. Are you confident this means we can sort of set aside all that older, conflicting research?
I wouldn't say throw it out, but dramatically refine it. This new data set was validated against over 10,000 field plots. The certainty is extremely high. It's the solid baseline policymakers have been desperate for.
So let's zoom into that timeline. With this new, highly resolved data, we can finally pinpoint that inflection point. What did the continent's carbon budget actually do between 2007 and 2017?
The timeline shows a really rapid trajectory. The first period, from 2007 to 2010, it confirms what we thought. Africa was a major sink.
It was absorbing carbon.
Actively. The continent was gaining biomass at a pretty impressive rate, about 439 teragrams of above-ground biomass per year, plus or minus 66.
439 teragrams. That's nearly half a gigaton of carbon a year, a massive natural service.
It is. But that robust gain didn't last. We then hit this critical reversal phase between 2010 and 2015.
And this is when it all changed.
This is it. The continent flipped completely. It went from that substantial gain of 439 to a net annual loss of 132 teragrams per year. That period right there is the moment Africa officially switched from a sink to a source.
That is an astronomical swing. If you think about the difference between what it was gaining and what it started losing, you're talking about a swing of over 570 teragrams in just a few years.
Yeah.
Can you put that in context? I mean, that's like the annual CO2 emissions of a major industrial country like Germany or Canada.
It absolutely highlights the scale of the problem. You didn't just lose the benefit of the carbon sink, you also gained a whole new emission source.
And it didn't stop there.
No, the situation didn't stabilize. From 2015 to 2017, the decline continued, losing an average of about 41 teragrams a year. The overall trend, especially after 2010, is one of rapid, accelerating biomass loss.
So the signal is just Eschen, it's completely unambiguous, the planetary lung is damaged, and it's now bleeding carbon.
Driven by escalating losses, yes.
Okay, so understanding the where is just as critical as the when. Was this accelerating loss happening evenly across the continent, or was it really localized to specific vulnerable spots?
It was overwhelmingly concentrated. The primary driver of this whole switch was happening in the areas that hold the most carbon to begin with. The tropical moist broadleaf forests.
So these are the really dense high-carbon forests, the carbon vaults of the continent?
Exactly. The density there is just staggering. On average, these African tropical forests have an AGBD of over 396 megagrams per hectare.
Wow.
And in the Congo Basin, that can climb as high as 429. To give you a mental image, 400 megagrams per hectare is like packing 1,600 big, mature trees into an area the size of a football field.
So when you lose 1 hectare of that forest, the carbon release is it's off the charts compared to other places.
Exponentially higher. And this high-density biome is where the flip was the most dramatic.
Just completely reversed itself.
Completely. The tropical moist broadleaf forest went from gaining a healthy 192 teragrams a year between 2007 and 2010 to losing a staggering 154 teragrams a year in the final period of the study.
And where were the hotspots for that loss?
Heavily concentrated. The Democratic Republic of Congo, Madagascar, and certain parts of West Africa. This is where deforestation is escalating the fastest, driven by things like agricultural expansion and illegal logging.
So the villain is clear, the collapse of these incredibly high biomass areas, but you did mention there was an offsetting factor that some areas were actually gaining biomass.
That's right.
Where were those unexpected gains happening, and why weren't they enough to, save the budget?
The gains were seen mainly in the vast tropical grasslands, savannas, and shrublands biome. This covers a huge part of the continent. But the critical difference is its AGBD, its density.
Much lower, I assume.
Much, much lower. It averages only about 45 megagrams per hectare, so nearly 10 times less dense than the moist forests.
Right, so for every 1 hectare of dense rainforest you clear, you would need almost 10 hectares of savanna to grow enough wood to offset that loss.
That is the hard math of the carbon budget.
Yeah.
The likely cause for the savanna gains is something called shrub encroachment. And this is plausibly boosted by what's known as the carbon fertilization effect.
Where the extra CO2 in the atmosphere is actually helping some plants grow faster?
Exactly.
Yeah.
In these drier ecosystems, the increasing CO2 seems to favor the growth of woody species over grasses.
So the savannas are kind of trying to help out.
They are, but they just don't have the capacity, the density to keep up with the sheer scale of destruction in the moist forests.
So that's the summary then. The gains in the grasslands, while interesting, were just They were completely insufficient to counter the massive accelerating losses from the dense forests.
Utterly insufficient.
This continental shift, it has to change the math on the global climate crisis. What are the immediate consequences for meeting the Paris Agreement goals now that a major sink has become a major source?
Well, it significantly widens the global greenhouse gas emissions gap. The world was sort of budgeting for Africa to continue providing this huge carbon service.
We were counting on it.
We were. And now we have to account for those lost removals plus the new source of emissions. The buffer is gone, which means global net zero targets just became much, much harder to hit.
That puts an immense amount of pressure on governments and their commitments.
It does. The current revisions of the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, they need to be radically more ambitious to compensate for losing this natural sink. Relying on forests to bail out fossil fuel emissions, that's just not an option here anymore.
Now, this is where that high-resolution data really pays off, isn't it? Before, with the coarse data, we could only say, Africa has a problem. Now we can point to specific villages, specific hectares, specific drivers.
Exactly. How does that change the policy game? It allows for truly targeted interventions
And accountability.
instead of just regional programs.
Right. Traditional programs like REDD Plus often operate at a regional scale. With 100-meter data, conservation policies can be prioritized right down to the local level. We don't just know deforestation is high in the DRC.
We know where in the DRC. We know it's escalating rapidly around a specific new road or a new agricultural frontier that's targeting a specific crop for export.
That moves the whole conversation from abstract conservation to, well, to enforcement and to targeted economic incentives.
Precisely. It allows donors and governments to monitor if their financial incentives are actually working and in near real time. It strengthens forest governance because the data provides undeniable proof of location and timing.
And it must help restoration efforts, too.
Hugely.
Right.
Initiatives like AFR 100 can use this to see exactly where the most carbon-rich areas were lost so they can prioritize where to focus regrowth efforts.
And looking ahead, the forces driving this pressure, they aren't slowing down. What future pressures are likely to make this trend even worse if we don't act?
The trends we're seeing are deeply tied to socioeconomic realities. You have rapid population growth across the continent, which increases demand for farmland and for fuel wood.
And then there's the global demand.
Crucially, yes, you have increasing global export demand, especially from Asia, that's driving these commodity frontiers deeper and deeper into the forest.
So the loss is often driven by an external economic demand that funnels into a few very high-value, high-biomass regions.
Which requires governance that goes beyond national borders. Africa's long-term ability to become a sink again will depend heavily on international financial support, combined with local governance that can successfully shift resource use away from this unsustainable export-driven model.
So this evidence really just confirms it. The collapse of a few key high-carbon biomes has fundamentally changed the continent's role in the climate system, and it's because of immediate human actions.
That's the takeaway.
So, to synthesize this profound shift for you, Africa's forests and savannas moved from being a substantial carbon sink to a net source between 2010 and 2017. This continental reversal was driven almost entirely by the accelerating collapse of those dense, high-biomass tropical forests, which far outweighed any small gains in the savannas. And the granularity of this new data, it finally provides the tools and the extreme urgency to move from just general policy goals to prioritize location-specific action.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to consider. This is drawn directly from the study's fine print. The authors themselves acknowledge that quantifying AGBD in the absolute densest forests, the places where biomass is over 350 megagrams per hectare, that remains really difficult.
Even with these advanced new systems.
Even with them. Their analysis suggests that in these most critical carbon vaults, they may actually be underestimating the full impact of forest loss.
So what you're saying is this critical reversal from a major sink to a major source, which is already a global catastrophe.
It may in reality be even more pronounced than what this groundbreaking dataset has reported.
The speed and scale of this loss are a clear warning about the fragility of the planet's remaining natural systems.